Hi everybody and welcome to another piano video here on the Marion Pianos YouTube channel. My name is Stu Harrison and in today's video we're going to be comparing Kawai's new CN201 with Roland's RP701. These are both huge sellers globally. They are a great replacement for people considering a used upright piano and not wanting the reliability issues or looking through dozens and dozens before you find one that feels right and is technically in good shape. This is a perfect match for a customer just like that, or of course somebody starting out and not knowing really what instruments for them, but knowing they want to buy something with quality. Also two great options. So we're going to be talking about their sound, comparing the piano tone specifically, the action and other features. We hope you really enjoy the comparison. If it's the first time that you have seen us here on YouTube, we'd also invite you to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We'd love to see you back and become part of our growing community of piano lovers from all over the world. Without further ado, let's dive right in with the CN201 and RP701 right away. So the CN201 is pretty new on the scene, and we've done a number of comparisons, but one of them that I really wanted to get to was the CN201 versus the Roland RP701. They're really well matched for a number of reasons, least of which is that they're practically the same price. And they're often being sold side by side in piano stores kind of around the world, around North America, but they are very different beasts. With the Kawai, we have an instrument that remains very much focused on the pianistic experience. When it comes to the Roland, as they have often done with models, they've really focused on giving a nice breadth of experience and options for people who own this instrument. For sure, they have put a lot of focus in on the acoustic side of things, but there is a much wider range of sounds and piano sounds and other related sounds that are available, and their extended experience with the app tends to be quite a bit better and more enhanced than what you get on the Kawai. That being said, this is really a combination of not just the sounds on board, but also the speaker systems and the action, and when you tally that all up, what you really get is a piano with the Kawai that I think remains maybe the slight favorite for people who are going to be almost primarily focused on playing this as a piano and maybe even as a classical piano. For people who are looking for a nice, well-rounded experience in which piano playing is going to be a big part of it, but maybe not the singular focus, the Roland brings a lot of strong arguments to the table. Let's start with sound on the Kawai. Now the CN201 is the successor to the CN29, which was a digital piano that I loved. I thought that for the price point, the speaker quality and the action quality, and especially the SK-EX sample set, really was like market leading. It just kicked the living daylights, in my view, out of pretty well anything else in its price range when it came strictly down to the piano experience it delivered with headphones off, speakers on, for the money. I just thought it was killer. The CN201 certainly is carrying on that tradition. Now this has been a pretty minor upgrade from the 29. By and large, the instrument remains pretty intact from the 29, but there are a couple of meaningful differences. One of them is that Onkyo went out of business, which was one of Kawai's chip suppliers that was responsible for the headphone amplifier as well as a lot of the digital signal processing. So they've now replaced that with another company who has chosen not to do the whole co-branding thing. So without ripping the chip boards apart, we're not actually going to know who that supplier is. But I can tell you that the result is a very nice one. The whole oral experience with the headphones is less harsh when you get into some of the higher volumes. And the spatial 3D spatialization that they have going on just feels like it's better sculpted, it's better crafted. There's less jaggedy edges that your ear is picking up on. So the tone engine on the CN201 is more or less the same as the 29, but with those notable improvements. So we've got some headphone stuff going on, but really it's that 3D spatialization, which translates into soundstage if you've got a good enough set of headphones. And certainly I've got the Mesa Classics for people who are familiar with that. That's kind of a nice mid-range headphone. Really gives some great definition, and you can hear it on the 201. It's coming in at 192 notes worth of polyphony, which is ample for people who are playing solo piano. Besides the SK-EX, you've got EX and then this upright sample set, which is kind of new to the whole Kawai universe. Kawai US lists this as a K60 upright. I know that the current version of that piano would be the K600, so I'm not sure whether it is actually a K60, which would be one generation ago, or whether this is a K600 and it's maybe been a typo. Not too sure, but what is quite obvious is that it is an excellent sample set of a real upright piano, which is a rarity. So often on digital pianos, uprights get the short end of the stick, and it's usually an artificially truncated or affected grand piano sample where they've really kind of shortened the sustain, or the attack sounds really weird. It doesn't even sound like an upright piano. This is a good one. So before we go any further, let's listen to those three core samples, the SK-EX, EX, and the upright, as rendered through this brand new CN201 chipset combination. Now let's hear the EX. And then here is that upright sample. Now when I go back to the SK-EX and the EX and just toggling between those two specifically, obviously there's a tonal difference between it, but there's also this spatial difference where it's very obvious that they've been recorded differently. Mic placements are a little bit different, maybe it's even in a different studio, different time, and so that's kind of a cool experience to give yourself, not just being able to play two separate pianos, but so obviously two separate spaces. Once we get past those core samples, you then have a set of variations based on those core samples. So, for example, you've got SK-EX Jazz, which usually means that it's EQ'd a little brighter. Or EX Pop. SK-EX Mellow. EX Mellow. And then finally you get into the other set of instruments, which are going to be well known to anybody who's been within the Kawai ecosystem for a few years. This Time piano. Modern. Or jazz organ. Which I still think is probably one of the best jazz organs out there in this type of an instrument configuration for this price range. I love the fact that it comes pre-defined with the left pedal, or the soft pedal rather, triggering the Leslie to spin up or spin down. And there's even a little bit of grit, a little bit of distortion on there, which is pretty authentic. I've always been pretty impressed by that. And then a church organ. Vibraphones. So as I've said a few times before, the supporting tone banks on some of these Kawais kind of feel at times like they're a bit afterthoughty. If you were looking for like a great string sample, I don't think you're going to turn to the CN201. If you're looking for you know, an expansive collection of E pianos or bass tones or brass, like none of that is going to land here. You buy this instrument for its acoustic piano tones, and that's pretty well it. I mean, I think the Rhodes is decent. I think the jazz organ is decent. Decent enough to play for fun. But really, as we said before we got into the playing, the focus here is piano. So now let's switch over to the Roland RP701. A very different animal in terms of the breadth of sound that you have available. RP701 has 324 available sounds. And even just within the acoustic range, there are quite a few additional samples and patches, I guess you would refer to them as, within that compared to the Kawai. And if we start just at the concert grand piano, this is what it sounds like. Then there is ballad piano. Mellow piano. Bright piano. Upright piano, upright mellow, upright bright. Ragtime, of course. A classical forte piano, one of the original, something that, you know, Beethoven would have been playing on. And finally, harpsichord. So it looks like really 14 acoustic piano patches on the 701. And before you get into your E-pianos, and then tremolo, pop, that's nice. So I'm not going to go through all 324, but the range is pretty extensive. And then, of course, you get into strings, you get into organ, voice, and then finally the full general MIDI 2 sound bank. Now, navigating on this is really very easy. They've got a nice kind of data wheel that makes it easy to jump between categories and the individual selection within that category. which is just great. But just to go back to 201 here for a second. So just a very different piano experience between the two in terms of the tone. Now on the Roland, one of the biggest differences when you get the headphones off is going to be those speakers, because we're talking about a pair of 12-watt speakers versus the 20-watt speakers on the Kawai. And while you can't really tell the difference in the mid-range and in the high-end, in fact, there's moments where I actually kind of prefer the high-end presentation out of the Roland versus the 201. The low end on the Roland definitely doesn't stand up to just the oomph that you get out of the 201. So there's a little bit of compromising that you need to, I guess, weigh out in terms of the speaker presentation and quality of the speakers and the quantity of sounds and the quality of those sounds between these two. As I said in the opening remarks, I think to me the acoustic piano on the Kawai and just the way it's been recorded and the speakers on board, if you're really going to be focused on playing this primarily without headphones or even with headphones, but a mix of both, and that's where you're going to be, I think the piano presentation over here maybe feels a little more authentic, but there's tons of users out there where that's not the be-all and end-all, and they want a nice mix and they want to be able to use a pretty wide variety of tones. And I think, you know, the Roland just blows it out of the water. Also 256 notes worth of polyphony over here. And of course, if you've just got the headphones on, then it's really just a personal preference in terms of which sample you like. And there are a lot of people on both sides of the camp that prefer one versus the other. I'm sure we'll see some people putting some comments in there. We are going to take a quick break and move right on to a discussion on action. Thank you so much for being with us. So now we're going to get into action, which is a section that we really love to also focus on. Now with the 201, we actually do have an updated action. This is the RH3, but is the RH3 improved action, which is really an improvement of the cushioning that's going on with these keys. I've said this in several other videos. I think the pandemic made key cushioning a really big deal for a lot of people because they suddenly realized that digital pianos, even with headphones, still make a lot of noise. And so cushioning that action has become a big priority for, I think, every manufacturer. So this RH3 still has your triple sensor, still has the escapement, still has the key surfaces on the top, which are great, nice matte on both the white and the black keys. But it's got this improved cushioning, which makes this one of the quietest actions that I would say falls into a professional grade action on the market. I really like this new RH3 improved. It feels good from a weighting standpoint. There's really no difference between it and the previous RH3 in terms of how they weighted this out. But there's very, very little key noise now. So I think for people who are playing a lot with headphones, this is going to be really meaningful. Or for people who have people underneath them living, you know, in a lower story or something like that, even with or without headphones, can really make a big difference. Over here on the Roland, we've got the Roland PHA-4. This is an action that's very popular, been out for a long time with Roland. It's now been standardized. There's only one version of the PHA-4, and it's been that way for probably 4 or 5 years or something like that. The PHA-4 uses a triple action. It uses also escapement, or sort of features escapement. It's got more of a micro texture on it rather than just a matte finish like the Kawai does, so it actually sort of looks like there's a bit of ivory there. The black key has sort of a bit of an ebony effect, but it's more just a matte thing. Now the PHA-4 is a slightly heavier action. The static resistance on this keyboard is sort of in the high 50s, meaning the amount of pressure you need to apply to get the key in motion. Once the key is in motion, that drops to like 52, 53. In either case, both of these actions, I would say, are amongst the best constructed, the most reliable, and the best MIDI output of any of the actions under like $3,000 that you're going to find out there. So I'm a big fan of either one of them, but they do have a very different feel. I think for a classical person who's very used to an acoustic experience, this is going to feel a lot more like a small grand. Over here with the PHA-4, it really kind of has its own thing. You know, Roland has focused on actions for a long time, and I think they've got a feel that you know, is very responsive. It feels good to play on, but doesn't necessarily feel like any specific acoustic piano. All I can say is I'm used to it, I love it, and I know that quite a few other people do as well. We're going to take one last quick break, get some specs up for you on the screen there, and come back and discuss features and cabinets in our third section. Thanks so much, we'll be right back. So the CN201 has a slightly redesigned user interface or control interface. It's still very simple, and it can be because the CN201 from a feature standpoint isn't that extensive. You know, this has a basic recorder on board. We're only talking about a few dozen sounds to have to navigate through. And a lot of the other functionality you're going to get comes from extending this through its Bluetooth radio onto apps, and even you know, Kawai's apps. So there's not a great need to have too many buttons, and I like the improvement and the slight tweaks that they've made to that over the CN29. It's easy to use, easy to see, very intuitive. They have added Bluetooth audio now to the CN201, which is something that was not on the CN29 before. So you can stream Bluetooth audio to these speakers. This sounds great, it's nicely balanced. You can also use the wireless connection to be linking up to Kawai software or other software, you know, GarageBand Mobile or any of the other multitude of apps out there that utilize Bluetooth over MIDI, or MIDI over Bluetooth rather. This comes in a number of different finishes. You can get it in the white, you can get it in a satin black as well as a rosewood. Comes with a matching bench, comes with the triple pedal, and also comes with a USB connection so that you can have a wired connection either to your like a mobile device or of course a computer. On the Roland side of things, you've got a similar level of cabinet options. In fact, I think you have one more because you can get this in a light oak, which is really pretty stunning. You can get it in white, you can get it in like this charcoal, as well as a rosewood. And just like the F701, the RP701 also includes a box or a bench rather, right in the box. This also has Bluetooth audio and Bluetooth MIDI, which is super handy. And because now we're getting into a much higher level of functionality in terms of its playback, in terms of the number of songs that are loaded on board, the lesson books that are loaded on here, and the metronome options and all that stuff, you really do have a more intense user interface. It's not that it's confusing. I actually really like the fact that they've got this data wheel to help you navigate through the various things. I also like that they've got the setup button way over here on the left so that you don't accidentally get into it when you're not intending to get into it. Another thing that you're able to use on here is the auto accompaniment through the Roland app. Now when you're using it through Bluetooth, you're going to experience a very slight delay in terms of it responding to your input. If you use a wired connection, with the Roland app is now just recently released, it does this. You can use a USB connection. It's instant, and you get a really great experience. It is fairly basic compared to what you can do with other arrangers, but for, I would say, the general public, this is a ton of fun, but you do need to use the app to access it. You're not able to get into that just through the user interface. Both of these instruments have metronomes. Both of these instruments are able to be split into two. You're able to layer it as well. They both have duet mode, so you can split the instruments that way and have an identical range piano on the opposite sides of the instrument. And of course, they both have quite a few options when it comes to headphones. They both have two headphone jacks, and you can select the various spatialization options that you want on it. All in all, two really great options for people who are looking for a piano good enough to deliver a great piano experience, but cheap enough that you are still saving quite a bit from getting into the least expensive acoustic piano option. So it's a really nice midpoint, but the focus is very different. For people who are focused primarily on a piano experience, I think that's where this Kawai really shines. I don't even think they're pretending that this is really focused towards anyone except a piano player and somebody who's going to be primarily focused on maybe even classical piano or certainly solo piano. And in that regard, it's phenomenal. I think the action, I think the piano tone, and the way that they've got that mated to the speakers really delivers a sensational experience for the price. Over here on the Roland, you've got a piano which is far broader in its feature set and in the sound set that it makes available to it. I think the action is extremely well made. I think it's very, very accurate. Slightly different feel to the Kawai, and where you're giving something up in exchange for a lot of those sounds would be the power of the speakers, which, 12 watts versus the 20 watts per side does really make a difference. So if you are going to be using headphones primarily, I think it's really down to your preference between action and piano sample, and maybe this video has already given you a clue in terms of which piano tone you might like more. And if you're going to be using it really through the speakers and you've got a bigger space to fill, there's no question the Kawai is just going to fill that space a little bit more with a more lower end presence than you'll get out of the Roland. Perhaps it's worth noting that at least here in the store we sell virtually equal numbers of these two instruments. So for all the pros and cons I've listed, people are pretty equally divided in terms of the ones that we come into contact with. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this look at these two pianos. If you happen to be in that category, hopefully you find it useful. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Stu Harrison. This has been Miriam Pianos on YouTube. We're always coming out with these types of videos, and so if you enjoyed it, you found it useful or helpful, please hit that subscribe and notification bell so you can come back and see us again for future videos. We would love to have you back. Take care and have yourselves a great day.